On this Monday night, new COVID-19 vaccine deals. The feds secure millions of more doses on one condition.
Canadians will have access to the doses they need.
Why some experts feel Canadians will be left waiting for the shot. What came toppling down is going back up. The debate over memorializing Canada's first Prime Minister. Peace in the air? The historic journey for Israel and the United Arab Emirates, and who's calling it shameful. Plus, this year's must-have school supply.
I always wanted one that reflected my personality.
The best masks for kids.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with the race to develop an effective COVID-19 vaccine and the new efforts to ensure Canadians get access. The federal government says it has signed deals with American drug companies Novavax and Johnson & Johnson to reserve doses of their vaccines if they're deemed successful. Similar deals are already in place with Pfizer and Moderna. The government says altogether these deals could result in tens of millions of vaccine doses for Canadians. But first, they must prove to be safe and effective, and that appears to be a ways off. Couteur reports on the push to secure a vaccine and the politics at play.
In politics, optics is everything. So the image of the Prime Minister visiting a company that could help manufacture a COVID-19 vaccine should inspire confidence. The reality is Canada is in the middle of difficult negotiations with a number of companies to reserve a supply of vaccines or even have a chance of getting a successful vaccine.
There's obviously a lot more work to go as there are many, many different organizations and companies researching vaccines. But our focus is going to be on making sure that when a vaccine is developed, Canadians can have access to it as quickly as possible.
A promising collaboration with Chinese firm CanSino Biologics went sour when China refused to sign export permits for the potential vaccine. Government officials point out Canada still has 4 other deals with major pharmaceutical companies, which could guarantee us tens of millions of doses.
It's fully realistic that some of these vaccines may never end up making it to market, but the more vaccines that we have access to, the more likely we are to start vaccine rollout programs.
Some infectious disease experts believe Canada is late to the game. The U.S. inked a deal with Pfizer this summer for up to 600 million doses of a vaccine. Weeks later, Canada secured up to 20 million doses, leading some to believe we'll be at the back of the line.
Canadians are going to wait months longer than Americans and Europeans to get their shots. And that's because our government has left it very late in the day.
Not true, says the minister in charge of procurement.
Within the contracts that we are negotiating, we have built-in delivery dates as early as first quarter of 2021.
And one member of the Federal Vaccine Task Force says securing the right vaccine is their top priority.
We don't want a winter to go by without having access to vaccine if there is one that has shown to be promising.
But that's only after the vaccine receives proper approval from Health Canada, which the Prime Minister said will not be rushed. Contrast that with the United States, where the Food and Drug Administration has opened the door to approving a COVID-19 vaccine before Phase 3 trials are complete. Robin?
Couteur in Ottawa. Thanks, Mike. The federal government has extended a loan program for Canadian companies struggling during the pandemic. The Canada Emergency Business Account now goes until October 31st. The program helps small businesses and not-for-profits finance expenses that can't be avoided or deferred. Under the program, struggling companies qualify for loans up to $40,000, of which $10,000 is forgiven if it's repaid by 2022. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says the federal government will also expand eligibility to businesses that handle transactions through personal bank accounts. In Ontario tonight, the government is facing a legal fight over its back-to-school plans. With just weeks to go until classes resume, the province's 4 teachers' unions have filed an appeal with the Labour Relations Board. They say the government has failed to address their health and safety concerns. The Premier says his government is doing its best. Doug Ford accuses the unions of just wanting to cause trouble.
I'm begging now for the teachers' unions to work with us. We have done absolutely everything that they've wanted, everything that the advice from the health table, everything from the Ministry of Health. We're sparing nothing. Every idea possible, we're putting into the classroom.
Next door in Quebec, class is already back in session. French language schools opened last week, and today English language students had their first day in class. Mike Armstrong has more on how it's gone so far and the challenges that lay ahead.
The first day of school tends to mean some butterflies, but this year's a little different. COVID-19 means kids have been out of classes for more than 5 months, and they're going back with masks.
It's okay. I'm used to it now. I have to wear it everywhere, so it's okay.
Now, not everyone's making that nervous walk back to school. The English Montreal School Board has had about 400 applications for students to do classes remotely from home. Parents have to submit a doctor's note explaining the reason.
They have a health issue that makes them or a household member vulnerable to COVID.
Quebec's French schools started up again last Thursday, but even though this was literally only day 3, there have already been COVID-19 cases in several schools. At one high school, 55 students have been told to self-isolate for 2 weeks.
We're investigating every case, every outbreak, and we intervene in the first 24 hours.
At this school northwest of Montreal, 4 teachers have tested positive, and another 20 teachers have been told to stay home as a precaution. That's meant some students are in class being taught by a teacher on video conference.
C'est bizarre.
It's bizarre, she says. It's different. We'll have to get used to it. Well, one teachers' union is raising concern about teachers moving around. It's not uncommon for substitutes or art teachers, for example, to go from school to school, even in the same day. Could they spread COVID-19? This union leader says they don't want to repeat what happened in the healthcare system, where staff carried COVID-19 from one senior's residence to another. One issue they've already tried dealing with at this school is crowded hallways. They're trying to stagger breaks to cut down on contact between students. Well, this is a photo taken Monday that shows there's still room for improvement. Mike Armstrong, Global News, de Montagne, Quebec.
Keeping kids in school will depend on whether COVID-19 infections are under control. Today, Quebec's premier pleaded with his province to do their part and follow the rules.
We need to get back to the discipline we had in the spring. We don't want to close our businesses, and above all, we don't want to close our schools.
Quebec recorded the most new cases of any province today. 140 more people tested positive. Ontario, Alberta, and BC each recorded more than 100 new cases. Global News has uncovered explosive allegations the RCMP ignored repeated warnings about a suspected mole. Cameron Ortis, a former high-ranking civilian intelligence official, is facing criminal charges, accused of preparing to share classified information. Now, a new lawsuit alleges those working under him complained about his strange and controlling behavior 2 years before his arrest. Abigail Beeman has the exclusive details.
3 RCMP employees allege the workplace culture rapidly deteriorated in March 2016 following Cameron Ortis's Director General appointment. They say very early on, Ortis began to engage in a pattern of degrading and abusive behavior, which belittled these employees, undermined their value and work, damaged their reputations more broadly throughout the RCMP, and caused them significant distress and mental suffering. The group says by early 2017, nearly half of the original National Intelligence Coordination Center analysts had left because they couldn't handle the stress of working under Ortis. But the trio says the most damaging revelation came when they learned the intelligence that Mr. Ortis had stolen and sold included their work, and they were told investigators believe Ortis systematically targeted them and attacked their careers as part of his larger plan to misappropriate their work and use it for personal gain.
I think there's a larger issue that comes out of this case, which is, had these allegations of harassment been addressed sooner by RCMP management, would it have been possible for them to catch Cameron Ortiz sooner? and prevent all the damage that he may have indeed caused.
The employees raised red flags consistently over several years. They say the RCMP eventually launched a review in December 2019 after Ortiz's arrest. A redacted version included in the lawsuit showed a failure of leadership at all levels of senior management, but the lawsuit alleges no action has been taken.
We take these reports extremely seriously, and I can assure you that Minister Blair is following up on them and looking into what may have happened around this case.
Neither Blair's office, the RCMP, nor Ortiz's lawyer commented by deadline. Each plaintiff is seeking at least $1.9 million in damages, and a security source unconnected to the lawsuit confirms to Global News employees raised concerns about Ortiz's behavior. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
The toppling of a statue of Sir John A. Macdonald has reignited the debate over how to honour Canada's first Prime Minister. Politicians of all stripes condemn the act of vandalism, some warning about erasing history. But Macdonald's legacy includes implementing the residential school system. Jamie Dahl looks at the delicate balance of preserving history while coming to terms with a racist past.
Painted and protested over the weekend, this monument of Canada's first Prime Minister came crashing down once again in Montreal. And while some celebrated, others, like Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney, jumped on Twitter, ready to rescue the monument and place it on the legislature grounds in Edmonton.
It was violence against public property, against a symbol of Canada. I will offer to take it off their hands at no cost to them, and to reassemble it and securely install it and protect it and defend it.
I don't see it as a fruitful next step in reconciliation.
There are at least 10 statues of Sir John A. Macdonald across the country. Many of them have been vandalized over the years, and last year the city of Victoria voted to remove one. And there are schools named after him too. This Calgary teacher says it's time to correct the story and the legacy of the first leader of this country.
His tool of genocide was schools. So to name a school after him, it tells me that we are definitely not telling the story correctly, because to memorialize someone who used schools as a weapon to kill the Indian and the child, in Sir John A. Macdonald's own words, well, that just means that we really don't care about the actions that he did in context. Sure, you want to put a statue up? Okay, tell the story.
On Monday, Quebec's premier announced the statue in Montreal will be restored.
We may have discussions in the next years about changes, but right now the decision is that it will be re-put in place.
Those discussions can't come soon enough, according to some.
Tearing down the statues doesn't change anything in particular, but if it provides us with a moment to become more deliberate and reflective, and to listen better and to work hard together to make legitimate decisions that honestly reckon with our past and our identity. That's why it happens, because we haven't done it.
And he says until the country does reckon with its past, statues will continue to be pulled down. Jamie Dahl, Global News, Calgary.
Accusations against the central figure in Hotel Rwanda. Coming up, a man once hailed a hero faces criminal charges. History unfolded in the Middle East today with the first commercial flight from Israel to the United Arab Emirates. It's a major step in warming up relations between the two countries after agreeing to a surprise U.S.-brokered peace deal. The UAE is just the third Arab state to establish diplomatic ties with Israel, but the pact has yet to be signed. And as Redmond Shannon reports, there is one contentious hurdle to clear.
Calling passengers for Abu Dhabi, a boarding announcement never heard before in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu greeted travellers too. The plane, carrying US and Israeli officials, headed on a flight path that's also new to Israeli jets, through Saudi Arabian airspace.
I think that all of this is hopefully a manifestation of what is possible in the Middle East.
Then, touchdown for the Star of David on Emirates soil. Assurances of Middle East stability didn't extend to the microphone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Speaking in Arabic, Israel's national security advisor invited other Arab nations to join the UAE in normalizing relations with Israel.
This is really a non-event. A non-event portrayed as a major event. It's a non-event because it's just an officialization of ongoing relations.
With a common foe of Iran, Israel and the UAE had been cooperating for years, even reportedly on military exercises. But that is where problems could still arise before the deal is signed in Washington.
The UAE was expecting that this would be a green light for them to acquire F-35 planes from the US.
Israel fears that could signal a military power shift towards its new friend in the Gulf. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh called it a painful day, again lamenting what he sees as a betrayal by an Arab ally. This deal coming just months after Washington's Israeli-Palestinian peace plan that had no Palestinian involvement. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Lebanon's leaders have appointed the country's relatively unknown ambassador to Germany to form its new government. Mustafa Adib, who is affiliated with a small Sunni party, won the support of Lebanon's major political parties. He says he hopes to form government in record time. In his first move as Prime Minister designate, Adib visited one of the areas hardest hit by the deadly Beirut explosion. He's promising to speed up the investigation and get more financial help to rebuild. Adib's new designation came hours before French President Emmanuel Macron arrived to visit and pressed for major reforms to end Lebanon's political and economic crises. The man who inspired the Hollywood film Hotel Rwanda is being held on terror charges tonight. Paul Rusesabagina saved hundreds of lives sheltering people inside the luxury hotel he managed during Rwanda's 1994 genocide. He was awarded America's Presidential Medal of Freedom a year later. He's a staunch critic of Rwanda's long-serving president who is accused of silencing his opponents. Now, Rusesabagina is charged with terrorism, murder and kidnapping and is accused of leading terror groups. Still ahead, conflicting campaigns. Trump and Biden butt heads over a divided America. The candidates for the White House are hitting the campaign trail despite the surge in cases of COVID-19. Today's debate centers around the protests over racial injustice. Democrat Joe Biden took aim at Donald Trump, saying the U.S. president is driving division to shift the focus away from the pandemic. As Jennifer Johnson reports, Trump is planning to visit Kenosha, Wisconsin, the epicenter of the latest protests.
A divided America as clashes break out between pro-Trump demonstrators and those calling for an end to racial injustice. The two presidential candidates are clashing too. President Trump calls Black Lives Matter demonstrators thugs and anarchists. Democratic candidate Joe Biden wants police reform and an end to the violence.
Donald Trump has been a toxic presence in our nation for 4 years. Fires are burning and we have a president who fans the flames rather than fighting the flames.
You know what I say? Protesters, your ass. They're not protesters. Shut it down!
Biden says Trump is desperate to turn America's attention away from the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump says he wants law and order and plans Tuesday to visit law enforcement officers in Kenosha, Wisconsin, after a police-involved shooting of a black man ignited days of fury.
Right now is not the time. Presidents and are always welcome in the community. But the timing, I think, is not really a very good timing.
The president is also waging a Twitter war against Portland, Oregon's mayor, calling him a fool and a dummy after 95 straight nights of protests and threatening to send in the National Guard.
Either the president support us or he stay the hell out of the way.
Both sides say voters in November will have a clear choice on America's future.
Most of Donald Trump's America is peaceful.
We are not safe in Donald Trump's America.
Racial inequality is taking center stage as the candidates fight for votes and push very different agendas for a more peaceful America. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Up next, how to pick the right protection for kids heading back to the classroom. September is at our doorstep, and most students are either back in school or getting ready to go. Besides the usual notebooks and pencils, many kids will be required to return to school with masks. The rules vary from province to province, but how to pick the right one? Jeff Semple looks into that tonight.
Stephanie Clayton was born with a chronic illness and compromised immune system. She spent much of her life in hospital wearing a mask.
They're the surgical masks, so they weren't the most comfortable.
So she started making her own, with more comfortable cotton and custom designs.
I always wanted one that kind of reflected my personality and wasn't super ugly and like looked like I belonged in a hospital.
And suddenly, she's not alone. In the final hours of back-to-school shopping, many are now scrambling to purchase this year's must-have accessory, and retailers are getting creative. This high-end clothing store's top kid seller, masks with emojis. Child psychologists say these goofy designs are no joke.
So I think really engaging our children in, sort of like deciding and choosing the one that they like is a great idea.
This Toronto shop offers a wide range of fabrics and designs, from bamboo with room for a filter to lightweight polyester. The trick for parents is balancing comfort with adequate protection. Evidence suggests material from scarves or bandanas is only slightly better than wearing no mask at all. The government recommends at least 2 layers of tightly woven cotton or linen.
I think a 2-layer cotton mask, which is a very common design that's being sold quite widely, is really a good compromise. It's comfortable against the skin. It tends to be quite breathable.
Online ads depict happy masked families, though many parents believe this meme better captures the reality. This isn't the mask you wore to school, the mother says. No, this one is way cooler.
I think it's going to be difficult.
Clayton is now producing custom masks for her fellow students and donating them to local charities.
If you can find a mask that suits you, it definitely makes it more comfortable to wear.
Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Silver Birch Beach in Toronto. We would love to see your corner of this country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.